And here we go. Welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this service from First Parish Church of Kingston, Massachusetts. I am the Reverend Monica Jacobson Tennyson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am glad you have joined us today. If you have a chalice or a candle handy or the Worship Web app, Paula Fisher has our words for chalice lighting, and you are invited to join in kindling a flame.
From the Reverend Maureen Killeran, love is the aspiration, the spirit that moves and inspires this faith we share. Rightly understood, love can nurture our spirits and transform the world. May the flame of this chalice honor and embody the power and the blessing of the love we need, the love we give, the love we are challenged always to remember and to share. As we light this chalice, we remember that Unitarian Universalists across this country and around the world are also gathering today, many lighting candles, lighting chalices as we do.
Thank you, Paula. We're going to share a hymn now, so you are invited to mute yourself so that you can sing along with the video. It is hymn number 108, How Can I Keep From Singing? I'm going to put the lyrics in the chat so that we all have them available to us. And our recording comes from Andrew Garland, who recorded this hymn for us last spring and generously gave permission for us to share it again this morning.
My life flows on in endless song, above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, the far-off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars, I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile our thoughts to them are winging, when friends by shame are undefiled. How can I keep from singing?
Thanks, Andrew.
Our gratitude always for folks who are connected to this congregation from far and wide, and how technology allows us to share in their gifts. I'm going to turn it over now to our Director of Family Ministry, Jen Shattuck, to offer a time for all ages.
Good morning, everybody. So good to see you all. I have a question for you this morning, which is, who among you have heard the name Dale Carnegie? Raise your hand if you've heard the name. Yeah, really famous guy, right? He is the author of the self-help book, How to Make Friends and Influence People, which was published in 1936. It's still, you can still see it on bookshelves today, still really popular, but it was published in 1936. And in her book, Quiet, author Susan Cain points to Dale Carnegie and people like him as being responsible for a huge cultural shift that happened during the early to mid 20th century, when we moved from being a culture that valued character to being a culture that valued personality. So if we were going to name some characteristics of a person of character, what do we think we would say? You can raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yes, Heather?
Integrity.
I saw Judy.
Heather stole my word.
Anybody else?
Loyalty.
Yes, Jessica? Sarah?
Loyalty.
Loyalty? Anybody else?
Truthfulness.
Anybody else?
You can
Compassion.
also, compassion. You can also type in the chat, I want to say, if you
Yeah,
are not able to unmute, you can chat it to us too.
yes, that's fine too. But yeah, so we once, before about 1920 or so, had been a culture that valued attributes on which people could improve. So you could always become more compassionate or more loyal or more ethical or become a person of greater integrity. But around 1920, because of advances in mass media and advertising and movies and that sort of thing, we shifted to being a culture based on personality. So we became a culture in which what was greatly valued was how personable you were. Do we have some examples in the chat, or you can raise your hand too, of what make a person personable?
It looks like them.
Yes, Heather.
Those social influencers on Instagram and such.
Oh, really good. Yes, Sue.
A sense of humor.
I see in the chat. Friendliness, yeah. So friendliness, likability.
We talk about politicians having charisma. this
Yeah,
sort of
charisma, likability, friendliness, that sort of thing. So yeah, being outgoing, or what we might say, we might call well-rounded, approachable, yeah. Fun-loving, yeah, all of these things. So do we see a difference between this list of what it means to be personable and the other list of what it means to be a person of character? Is there a difference that anybody notices? You can put
Superficiality.
Yeah, so you could call it superficial. You could also say they're things that we can see, and they're things that you may or may not be able to improve on within yourself. You might be naturally friendly or naturally outgoing, but you also might not be naturally outgoing. So the culture became really focused on things. Yes, Monica.
I just want to add that the list of what makes you personable rather than what makes you a person of character, the personable things are pretty subjective. I might consider someone to be approachable and someone else might not consider them approachable.
Right.
But we could both agree that someone is very responsible and always does what they say they're going to do, because that's a much easier thing to quantify, right? Every time I ask Joe to do something, Joe always does it for me, is a different conversation than, do I find it easy to talk to Joe? Do you find it easy to talk to Joe? Because we're different people.
Yeah. And so this culture based on books like How to Make Friends and Influence People based on things in advertising and mass media and movies, the culture became really focused on what people could see of you rather than on what you believed or what your ethics were, or what it was no longer a culture that was based on these character based things. And what to me is most interesting about that, because you could make arguments either way, you know, on whether it was a good development or a bad development, depending on who you asked. It was a major shift in the culture. But what I noticed most as I was reading about it is that those of us who are alive today did not know that this shift happened. We just, it is the culture in which we live. So for people to be likable and personable and fun loving and outgoing, we consider all of those to be normal things to want to be. And it's good to have character based things as well, but it is so common in our culture to have these personality based attributes that we don't even notice that it's something necessarily that we're living with. So later on, we're going to be hearing from Reverend Monica about what it means to notice that these are things that we may be living with, that it is a shift that happened.
Thank you, Jen, for that exploration of some history. Now I think Paula has a reading for us.
There. This is from The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonya Renee Taylor. I have my own name for natural intelligence. I call it radical self-love. Radical self-love was the force that cannoned the words, "Your body is not an apology," out of my mouth, directed toward a friend, but ultimately barreling into my own chest and then into the hearts of hundreds of thousands of people around the world. Evangelizing radical self-love as the transformative foundation of how we make peace with our bodies, make peace with our bodies and ultimately change the world is my highest calling. Coincidence after seeming coincidence has made that much evident. I don't know what your highest calling is. It's possible you don't know either. That's perfect. At this very second, a trembling acorn is plummeting from a branch, clueless as to why. It doesn't need to know why to fulfill its calling. It just needs us to get out of the way.
Thank you. We'll hear a little more about Sonya Renee Taylor's work in a moment, but first we have another hymn to share. This one recorded for us by Kathy Kay. So again, you are invited to mute and join in singing along. It is hymn number 86, Blessed Spirit of My Life.
Blessed Spirit of my life, give me strength through stress and strife. Help me live with dignity. Let me know serenity. Fill me
So our gratitude also for folks who are near as well as folks who are far, who share their gifts with our congregation and in our worship. As you have probably guessed from the reading and from the hymns and from the topic, we are talking about the idea of self-love today, what it means to engage in radical self-love as offered to us by the author Sonya Renee Taylor. But I want to start by telling you how I became acquainted with Sonya Renee Taylor's work. There was a quote that went around social media at the beginning of the pandemic that said this: "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal other than that we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." And when this quote went around social media, it was attributed to Brene Brown. And Brene Brown said, "That's a lovely quote, but I didn't say it. So you need to stop putting my name on it when you share this meme on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter." And so she set out to find out who had really said it. And it was the author and leader of the Body is Not an Apology movement, Sonya Renee Taylor, who apparently they had a conversation where Brene Brown said, I'm so sorry that your words have been being attributed to me. I want them to be correctly attributed to you. And Sonya Renee Taylor said, you know, I just figured it was a good idea that was out there in the universe. And if I was meant to get credit for it, the universe would sort of work it out so that I would. And otherwise, I'm just happy that people are sharing the idea. But Brene Brown and her social media team took on the work of being sure that credit was properly given. So when they see it misattributed to Brene, they tweet back at the person or they comment and they say, I need your help. We are trying to correct this misinformation. We want to lift up the work of Sonya Renee Taylor. And so her name and her influence is increased through this work to be sure that she is credited for her ideas. Sonya Renee Taylor is a queer Black woman. She has worked in all kinds of different movements, including as a sex educator. And she had this experience one day of speaking with a friend who was expressing some of the body shame, which is so common in our culture, and saying, you know, well, I just feel like I have to do this, or I can't do that, or I can't ask for this for myself because my body is difficult. And Sonya said to her, your body is not an apology. And it set her on this path for teaching what radical self-love might mean. So radical self-love, she says, is not just self-esteem or self-confidence or self-acceptance. All those things are good to have, but they are not the same as really radically loving yourself. Radical is a word that has to do with roots. So when we talk about radical self-love, we mean connecting to the original self-love that we knew as babies and toddlers. If you have seen babies and toddlers discovering their bodies, you will notice they think their bodies are delightful. And it is often as we grow that we begin to absorb messages that tell us that there is something wrong with us, that we should be embarrassed or we should want to change something. So when she says radical self-love, she means rediscovering that place within you where you have always known how delightful your body is. And why should we begin with loving our bodies? Because we all have one. You must live in a body to be in this world. And so that is something we have in common, and a place then to anchor our ability to love ourselves. Now, Sonya Renee Taylor talks about these voices that we hear from outside of the world, these voices that are rooted in this movement that Jen described to us during the Time for All Ages. In the early 20th century, when a shift began to happen from being a person of character to being a person of personality, the advertising tactics changed as well. Prior to the 1920s and 30s, an ad for soap might say, "This is a really good soap. It will help get you and your laundry clean." And when we enter into, and in fact, I'm going to read you this actual text. When we enter into these different ads, this is a soap ad from 1922. All around you, people are judging you silently. And a shaving cream ad, also from 1922. Critical eyes are sizing you up right now. This is the move toward convincing each of us that there is something wrong with us that makes other people not like us. And that if only we purchase the correct soap and shave with the correct shaving cream, perhaps we can overcome these deficiencies. This is a culture rooted in suspicion of ourselves and judgment of ourselves. And it has become a very efficient part of our lives. Because at this point, these advertising voices have become an outside voice that speaks inside our heads. You don't even have to watch an ad. You can probably have this experience of knowing that your own voice is saying to you, "My goodness, this thing about me is not good enough. This is too much. This is not enough. I need to change these things." But this is an outside voice that we can learn not to listen to return to the inner voice of self-love, which is our birthright. So a few examples of the ways that this culture of telling us that we are not enough and that we ought to change ourselves directly impacts us. Here is a question from the book. Sonya Renee Taylor writes, "If I handed you $15,000 because you were reading my book, what would you do with it? Let me make some guesses. Would you pay down debt? Would you put a down payment on a house? Would you take a vacation to some exotic location? Would you help your children or your loved ones? Would you go back to school? Would you buy an alpaca?" Whether or not I guessed your specific answer, I am willing to bet 5 million of Bill Gates's dollars that you did not say, "Sonya, I would buy a lifetime supply of anti-aging cream." And yet, she says, the average American woman spends $15,000 on beauty products over the course of her lifetime. And lest you think this only impacts those who identify as women, the average American man is socialized to believe that the only acceptable male body is a highly muscled body, which means that particularly among young men, there is a culture of crash diets, over-exercising, smoking, increased drug and alcohol use, and taking dangerous supplements in pursuit of this ideal body. And these are behaviors that have health consequences later in life. And for those in this country who identify as trans or non-binary, there are other impacts, including the fact that the TSA scanners at the airport are designed to alert to so-called anomalies in the groin area, meaning that if a TSA agent guesses a person's gender identity based on their appearance, and the scanner believes it does not match, that person is then subjected to a very invasive screening. These are ways in which a culture of having ideal bodies and seeking to make everyone conform to those ideals harms each and all of us. And these are only a few examples. It can be difficult to live in a body, in a culture that wants to tell us there is only one right way to be. But we have teachers like Sonya Renee Taylor who tell us that we can unlearn those outside voices. We can stop paying attention to advertising. We can resist systems of oppression, and we can seek radical self-love, which is a practice we will need to undertake our whole lives. She suggests we begin with the 3 pieces. The first piece is to make peace with not understanding. You will not always know why things are the way they are, and you do not need to. You don't need to understand someone else perfectly to be able to accept them. You can simply say, I don't understand, but I don't need to judge. This is the way you are. This is the way I am. That is okay. And to follow on that, to make peace with difference. Whether or not we understand each other, we simply are different from each other because each of us is unique. And there is an incredible range of ways to be an embodied human in the world. And those differences are not bad. They simply are. And then the third and hardest piece for many people is to make peace with your own body. She says, these other 2 sound great because you can say to yourself, well, yes, I wouldn't want to say anything to make my friend feel bad. I don't know this person at all, so I just want them to feel comfortable. We are often harshest with ourselves. So we must learn to make peace with our own bodies because it is this practice that allows us to more fully love others. How to make peace with your own body. She offers 4 tactics. The first is taking out the toxic. This means to intentionally choose not to bring in that outside voice of the world, to take a break from consuming advertising, to take a break from social media, from Instagram influencers, to just take a break so that you have a little space to notice what has been coming in from the outside, so that when you hear it again, you can say, oh, no, I don't want to let that into my mind. I don't need to listen to that voice. The second is the tactic she calls mind matters. This might be a meditation practice, and it might be a mantra. Sonya Renee Taylor suggests several mantras, most of which feel quite challenging. Things like, I love my body, and my body is perfect for my life. One of her most approachable mantras is simply to say to yourself, my body is my ally and not my enemy. My body and I are in this together, and my body is my ally. Third is to take what she calls unapologetic action. This means getting to know yourself, being sure that you are well acquainted with your own body and with the stories that you tell yourself about it. Pay attention to where those stories came from. Notice when they have become part of that outside voice telling you that you are wrong or not enough, and learn to tell yourself some new stories without apologizing for them. When you think you look good, there is nothing wrong with being proud that you look good. When you notice that your body is capable of doing something that you enjoy, there is nothing wrong with rejoicing in that fact. Find good stories to tell yourself about your body. And you may need to learn some new ways to live in your body as part of this, because we know that bodies change over the course of our lives. And what we may have done in the past, we may not do now. What we do now may not be something that we do next year. So you can, over the course of your exploration, discover what it is that your body can do now. Whether that is trying a new kind of movement or a new kind of stillness or a new way of dressing your body, you can figure out what it is that brings you some joy now. And you can claim it unapologetically. And finally, the practice of collective compassion. We learn to love ourselves, but we are not isolated creatures. We are in relationship with others. So the practice of loving ourselves is also the practice of loving those in our family and in our neighborhood and our friends. It's noticing when that outside advertising voice begins to slip out of our mouth. If we start to say to someone, oh, is that really what you're going to wear today? Notice that and say, you know what? You look great. Do you feel good? Fabulous. Do what feels good for you. Get into deeper relationships with people to undo the isolation, which is part of a culture of body shame. So much of this culture is about needing to hide the things that are too much or not enough. But when you have deep relationships with people, you can practice true acceptance, not this sort of conditional, well, I pretended to be really outgoing and I dressed in a careful way so you couldn't tell that this part of me is really embarrassing. But the more relaxed way of being together. Maybe you do go for a walk in your yoga pants, and that is okay. Remembering that part of loving yourself is knowing that love is not something you need to earn from yourself or from anyone else. Love is your birthright. In the same way that the acorn from the opening reading knows how to grow into an oak tree, there is in you a seed that knows how to love you and how to love everyone around you. If only we can get all of this cultural baggage out of the way. So why is it in this time of incredible turmoil in our country and in our world that I would talk about this practice of radical self-love and of accepting your own body? The answer, which Sonya Renee Taylor articulates beautifully, is that this is a place where we can undertake the work that ultimately builds a society of more justice, a garment that fits all of humanity. Because this culture of shame and judgment and hierarchy keeps us separate from each other, keeps us judging each other and jockeying for place, keeps us trying to figure out where people fall on the basis of their race or their gender or their ability or their age. And when we learn to set those things aside within ourselves and to help others set those things aside, we begin to collapse so many of these harmful structures in the society we live in. Radical self-love is the gateway to true social change because it dismantles these hierarchies within each of us. This is an important time for us to learn more and more about how to love ourselves and how to love each other so that we can all better love the world, which needs it so much. May it be so. I have a video meditation to share with you now. These are the words of the Reverend Kevin Tarsa, who rewrote the 23rd Psalm to make it a UU sort of reading. They were recorded by the Reverend Molly Hausch Gordon and set along with some stock footage. So I'm going to share screen so we can enjoy this.
May I remember in this tender moment that love is my guide always, shepherding me toward ways of openness and compassion. I have what I need, really, with love at my side, above me, below me, in front of me, behind me, inside every cell of me, love infused everywhere. Just when the weight of the world I inhabit threatens to drop me in place and press my hope down into the ground beneath me, love invites me to rest for a gentle while and leads the center of my soul to the quiet, still, restoring waters nearby that somehow I had not noticed. And so love quietly sets me once again on its tender and demanding path. Even when the walls close around me and the cries of death echo through untold corners, ripping my heart with fear and sadness, I know that all will be well. That I will be well when love whispers near to me, glints at the corner of my eye, rests with gentle and persistent invitation upon my shoulders. Yes, love blesses me, even as the sources and symbols of my pain look on. Love blesses me from its infinite well, and I turn and notice that goodness and kindness and grace follow me everywhere, everywhere I go. I live in a house of love, love that will not let me go. I live in a house of love and always will.
So thank you all for sharing in that video meditation. I'm going to invite Tony to give us a little additional music for reflection. And we will also have a chance to receive an offering this morning. I will put the giving link in the chat box in case you need it handy. Tony, whenever you're ready, go ahead. Oh, I think you're still muted. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and extinguish our chalices. Paula has words for that. And then I will stop the recording and we'll have a chance to share joys and sorrows amongst our community.
Chalice from Maureen Killeran. This is the message of our faith: to act with passion in the face of injustice, to love with courage in the midst of life's pain. This is the meaning of our chalice flame. May it empower our hearts until we are together again.
Thank you. So we will now stop our recording. If you are watching this on YouTube later, thank you for joining us for this service.